As a child in Pennsylvania, I remember fainting at the sight of something large, furry, and black in the edge of the woods while running a trail home from my friend's house. But that could have been a bear. However, then I moved to the Olympic Peninsula last fall, and after Thanksgiving, maybe early December, one morning around 4 a.m., our Labrador was whining, so I got up, put my shoes on, and let him out. He ran out all of 3 steps, stopped, and his tail went between his legs. He turned and jumped into the house, whining again. I could hear the dogs on this one road going crazy outside. There is limited development here, just the beach on the one side, mountains on the other, with one small highway between. I walked out into our driveway, being new and curious and eager to check out the neighborhood. Trees, trees, and trees. I was listening with my eyes closed, thinking, beagle. Then in the mix, hound. Shepherd. I was hearing all the different dogs. I was feeling like I was using echolocation because it was so dark, I couldn't see more than just our cars in the corner of the house. Then, suddenly, I heard what can only be described as a gorilla bark. One that shook the ground, and it came from the opposite direction, behind me. I've worked with crocodiles and alligators up to 13 feet and nearly a ton. I've worked with king cobras and been bitten by a cobra. I've camped the Serengeti and had lions brush up against me in the night through my tent. I stared down a dozen hippos from about 20 feet at Zima Springs in Kenya. I've been bitten by a Gila monster, drugged down the road by a horse on my head. Insert joke about head injury here. I've been kicked by emus, pecked by herons, mauled by prairie dogs on live TV, squeezed by pythons, bitten by rattlesnakes. But this time, I was scared. The ground continued to shake as this thing moved through the trees, likely heading right for me. Shaking from the movement, there was an audible grunting sound too, just a short distance away. I knew it was only getting closer to me. I had no idea what this thing would look like, I just knew it was massive. I also know that sound, that bark, it wasn't a person. Way too loud. It was not a bear, a cougar, elk, deer, or raven. Nor was a piece of machinery running in the quarry in the middle of the night. It was something big cutting through the quarry, coming from the beach, heading to the mountains before dawn. I don't know what it was, because I slowly walked back inside and looked out the window into blackness. I have since gotten a little braver and heard more suspicious sounds, but nothing as obvious as that night. I'm pretty positive that we'll find a few small troops of man-ape species from the Ice Age that still inhabit some nooks and crannies of the Northwest. Stay tuned. Have I ever seen Bigfoot? Not exactly. I came across something in my wanderings that could possibly fit into the Bigfoot lore, though. I didn't exactly see any bipedal primates that day, but what I found along the Snoqualmie River was inexplicable and kinda creepy. I went up along Mountain Loop Road in the Mount Baker Snoqualmie National Forest to explore an area new to me that didn't have any trails. I parked on the shoulder of the road and entered the forest. It's worth noting that in my bag I had a topo map, a compass. I knew exactly where I was at all times during this venture. I also let someone back home know what area of the national forest I would be in, as well as the expected time of my return in case anything awry happened. I threaded my way through the pathless coniferous forest towards the river. When I entered the riparian section along the water, I I was met with a strange sight. Dozens of alder, maple, and willow trees, smashed, shredded, ripped up by the roots. Others snapped, broken, or knocked over. It literally looked like someone had driven a tank through the forest, creating a swath of destruction about 50 yards long in its wake. Something or someone way off the beaten path here had thrown quite the temper tantrum. I'm mystified and more than a little creeped out. Who or what caused this? I check for tracks or prints in the forest loam. Claw marks on the shredded trees, hair caught on the twigs or undergrowth, scat to be stepped in. Nothing. The damage was fresh, none of the torn vegetation showing the slightest sign of wilt. Sap on the exposed and shredded tree trunks was still wet, and it had yet to drip. The path of destruction varied somewhat in width. It seemed to be about 8 to 12 feet along the length of the mess. It was obvious this was not the result of flooding, fire, or quake. Could a mini tornado have touched down here in these rugged Washington mountains? Never heard of it happening before, but then what was it? No trace of parts or anything mechanical. The terrain wouldn't have permitted any sort of vehicle down that far, off the road anyway. But still I search. I find no tire or tread marks, no paint scrapings on the tree trunks. The mess begins and ends abruptly, and without any further clues to its origin. I'm crawling around, so intent in finding a sign that I forgot one of the cardinal rules of tracking, to look up. There's many stories of trackers so intent on their pursuit that they failed to notice their quarry has circled back and positioned itself to ambush. Situational awareness should always go with attention to detail. I stand up. First, I'm hit with a disgusting smell, one that smells of literal garbage mixed with something I can't identify. Then, I notice the other odd detail. The forest has gone completely silent. And that's my cue to leave. I can't find any clues as to what caused this massive mess so far off the road. I head back to my car, trying to ignore the sensation of being watched, which is increasingly more obvious. About the time I can start to make out the breaks in the trees indicating the road, the forest has resumed its baseline noise, birds and insect activity. I left the woods none the wiser. Hopefully I didn't get too bogged down with the details of this account, but I'm still baffled as to who or what could have caused such destruction. A friend who's a Bigfoot hunter on his weekends was convinced that I found signs of Bigfoot territory, a warning to other bipeds to stay away. I don't know. Draw your own conclusions.